Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we have back with us, because we're still not sick of him yet, Randy Watts. Thanks, Randy, for coming on the show.
It's crazy that you're not sick of me yet, but thank you, Gene. It is always a pleasure.
And thanks, Megan, for joining in this interview.
Of course. I always love talking with you guys. Randy always has wonderful stories. I can't wait to hear what bomb he's going to drop this time.
That's right. And before the show, and Randy, we'll let Randy talk a little bit more about why he's doing the show. It's not really intentions like John DeLynn does for his show, but it's more like the backstory to it. But Randy was saying, I have a story to tell on this, and I haven't yet told it. It's like,
with all the podcasts,
there's a lot of stories Randy has that he hasn't told. But go ahead, Randy.
There actually are. With all the podcasts that I've done, thanks to you and Megan and a few others, it dawned on me that I've never told my story of deconstruction from the LDS Church. My purpose in doing this is not to slam the church so much as it is to make people understand why I'm no longer active and why I don't consider myself a member.
That's right. It's just information. It's just somebody's experience. And you can take it as, not gospel, but it's one man sharing his experience. And so Randy recently made a post, and I'll have him explain that a little bit more. And Randy's going to talk about his things that led up to not believing in the church's truth claims and other things. And so take it away, Randy.
Thank you. I have a fruit fly that just buzzed me. So thank you, Gene. Yes, I made this post on Facebook. The reason being, with all of my new community, and by the way, this is so easy to talk about, especially with you two, because you two are like two of my all-time favorite people, and I love you both dearly. I made a Facebook post because I was tired of the lies. I was tired of pretending, being two-faced. Like when I'm with my Exmo community, I can speak one way. When I'm with my family and nieces and nephews and LDS friends, I feel like I have to speak a different way with a different attitude. And I just realized that that's so hypocritical. And I got tired of pretending. So, the other day I made a Facebook post explaining that I'm no longer considered a member of the church. I have left the church. Why I did it, I put in there that one of the things that broke my shelf was this dishonesty about the church finances. There's several other things that broke my shelf, which we'll talk about here. I was a little nervous to put that out there, but I was incredibly touched to the point of tears when I saw this flood of supportive messages coming in, not only from my post-Mormon community, but from my LDS friends and my family. And, there were 2 or 3 wing nuts that, decided to preach their righteousness and judgment and say, oh, you gave in to temptation and sin. And it's like, you don't even know me. What are you talking about? But other than that, the love was just pouring in, and I felt more loved at that moment than I had ever felt in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When I was a little kid, I was born to a mafia leader who was based in Tucson, Arizona. That was the head of the mafia crew in the West. It's not anymore, but the Italian mafia had their headquarters, if you will, in Tucson, Arizona. the woman who gave birth to me was his mistress. And so, yep, I'm a bastard. But she went to him, she loved him dearly, and she told him that she was pregnant. And he said, well, guess what? My wife just got pregnant too. And I'm not going to get a divorce because it's against my Catholic religion. And I'm going to have to leave you and go with my pregnant wife. So my biological mother, who already had 3 kids, and she was a divorced woman, which back then had a real stigma to it. She was afraid that if anyone found out that she had a baby out of wedlock, that she would lose the right to have her children with her. Her husband was LDS and would attack and take the kids away from her. So she put me up for adoption. Well, I want to tell you that, and I'm going to fast forward, 38 years later, I had a beautiful reunion with her, and I was able to meet her, and I loved her dearly. And the first thing I did was thank her for letting me be born, for making the choice to give birth to me rather than, eliminate me. And she said, well, I'll be honest with you. If abortion had been legal, I would have gotten an abortion. But she said, I'm thankful now that I didn't. And we had a wonderful relationship. I met brothers and sisters I never knew that I had. And my father, biological father, passed when he was 57. But yeah, she told me all about him and his, his occupation. He had some front businesses. One of them was an insurance company, and she worked for that. They fell in love, and she got pregnant, and I was the result. Anyway, the family that adopted me lived in Arizona at the time, Tempe. I was born in the Mesa Southside Hospital, and I was raised LDS. I have a picture, one of my favorite pictures. I should have had it for you, but I was getting $1 because I went to my Sunday school class alone. And I was so excited to get that $1. And that was scary. I remember it was scary going into my own Sunday school class and not being with my mom and dad.
So religion paid off for you when you were young.
Yes. I got a payoff. You know what I mean? So I was very active in the church. I was blessed enough to be a leader throughout my whole life. I was president of Deacons Quorum and scout, whatever the, scout leader, and president of the teachers quorum and the priest quorum. And I was an example because I lived the gospel to the law. And I learned all about the things that they used to teach, which they don't teach anymore. I went on a mission. I went to Madrid, Spain. And on my mission, I've got to be honest, that's where I started having things loaded on my shelf a little bit. Because people, when I would approach them, I went to, like I said, in Spain, and the freedom of religion was fairly new. So everybody was Catholic. And some of them that were knowledgeable and educated would ask me about things like, I understand that your church is a cult. And I'd say, oh, no, it's not a cult. It's not a cult. It's the true church of Jesus Christ. It's the church that he established back in the day. And now this is the restoration. And I'd tell them about the Joseph Smith story. And I noticed when I was telling him this story about Christ and God appearing to him, it seemed so outlandish to me. It's It's like, I'm telling this story, and I would bear my testimony, but I wouldn't feel that burning in my bosom. I was just putting on an incredible act and telling them how sincere I was.
Hoping to fake it until you make it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like my mission was a success. I came home and, had all the hoopla of a returned missionary, and I did what they said. I did what the church counseled. I married the girlfriend that I left on my mission and started having kids right away. I'm no longer married to that girl. We were divorced 19 years later, but I was a true believer up until about my mission. And you know what really broke my shelf, I think, was we were having a conversation with one of the members, and she said, "I've invited the Jehovah's Witnesses. I want you to come defend the church if you would." I'm like, "So you lined up an argument for us?" I said, we're really not in the business of arguing with Jehovah's Witnesses, although we were, because they were there because of the freedom of religion. So, we'd see them
right. And it's the J-dubs that were the cult anyway. So this is going to be an easy win.
Right.
The J-dubs and the green dragon that they carried. The green dragon being the Bible that they changed to fit their narrative. And that was one of our points against the Jehovah's Witnesses. How ironic is that they changed the scriptures to fit their narrative? Anyway, I came home and started into business and continued, had 4 kids and ended up moving to Florida to work for the Walt Disney Company. Came back. My parents were ill. They had Alzheimer's and they passed away. And during all this time, I had 3 sisters who were, just amazing people. And I never wanted to let them down. So I continued to play the game. Then I lost my wife, Melinda, to cancer, and because I had remarried. Anyway, I started thinking about a few things after I lost her.
And she had lots of priesthood blessings.
Over and over again. My sisters always said, "We put her name on the temple list today." I got that every day. And they explained that when you put someone's name on the temple, the prayer roll, that it goes to all of the temples. It's everyone in every temple is praying for her.
So it goes to the top of God's inbox.
Exactly. And I had the bishop of my ward come give her a blessing. I gave her blessings too, but I didn't feel very worthy because at this point, I had pretty much stopped attending church. And because of all those blessings, that helped me realize that, I asked my sister, what is more important to God? The name being on the prayer roll in the temple, or a child or a grieving husband on their knees pleading for his wife or her mommy to live? What has more impact on God? They had no answer for me.
Yeah.
And she passed away. Despite all those blessings, despite her name being on the temple roll, prayer roll. There was some life insurance involved, and I went to the bishop, and he told me that, if you want her to be with you in the celestial kingdom, you need to make sure that your tithing is all paid up. And so I took, in desperation and in total grief, not thinking, I took that life insurance. It was a $30,000 policy. And I wrote a check for $30,000, hoping that that would catch up any tithing I ever missed. And I gave it to the bishop, and he didn't even say thank you or bless you, or he just said, okay. And he walked back into his office.
It's almost like the Catholic indulgences that Martin Luther protested against as one of his 95 theses.
Yeah. And it's not that I was expecting praise for giving him the check. I didn't want that. I wanted some kind of acknowledgement that, oh, you know, good for you. I think you've got a good shot of living with your sweetheart again. Something to that effect. Console me a little.
Just some kind of confirmation that you'd done the right thing or that you would be blessed.
So I went to sacrament meeting. I decided to be active again. I went to sacrament meeting and my heart was torn out of my chest. And I see all these couples holding hands, and during sacrament, the wife would tickle the back of the man, or the man would put his arm around the wife, and I'd see all this PDA going on, and I had no one to PDA with. There was no one I could put my arm around, and people didn't come up to me and tell me they were sorry. Even the Relief Society president, who was involved and knew all about this, never said a word about, we're sorry about the passing of your wife. So I decided I was going to go to a singles ward, a ward for single adults. And I found one. And I went in, and I started to feel a little good because I didn't see all the, couples, and people were single. And I went into, I did listen to the sacrament meeting. It was a fast and testimony meeting. Then we went into priesthood, and I participated in the class. And then before Sunday school, the bishop said, "Hey, can I talk to you for just a minute?" And so I went into his office, and I explained that, I just lost my wife, and that's why I'm new here, and blah, blah, blah. I told him my story, and I think I was in tears. And he said, "Well, we're glad you came to this ward, but I'm sorry you can't attend here." And I said, "Wait, what?" He said, "You can't attend here. You're 2 years too old."
You're 50?
I was 50. And he said, "You're going to have to find another ward." So I stood up and walked out of his office, got into my vehicle, and that's the last time I ever went to church. Because everything all my doubts came to fruition when he said that. I realized a few things. I realized that there was no compassion. This wasn't about helping people. I realized that there was no discernment, and it's all business for him. And he didn't care. He didn't care. To jump back when I was on my mission, we were talking with this, I strayed away from the story about the Jehovah's Witnesses. They came over to this member's house, and we came over. And I never did like to Bible bash. I listened to their story, and I would tell them that I admire them for sticking with their beliefs. And I bore my testimony, and it was a testimony that was more a testimony of my own personal thoughts and feelings. But then this gal bore her testimony, and she wept because she said she knew she was in the true church. And the meeting ended, and then I thought about it. How does she have that inspiration? How does she have that revelation from the Holy
You got
Ghost?
out testimonied.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, is it possible that she could have a true testimony of her church? What about the fact that we're the only true church on the earth? And why would the Holy Ghost give her any comfort and consolation? That was supposed to be all us. But that's when I realized, guess what? There's other churches out there. People have testimonies of their churches. And what, where do I get off thinking that my testimony is more important than hers? Fast forward again to this walking out of the church and sitting in my car after being kicked out of this ward. I knew then that I didn't belong in the church. I knew then that everything I'd heard didn't resonate truth to me. So I lived without the gospel for several years, and then I moved to Spokane, Washington, because two of my kids moved here, and that's when when you move and you're in a new place, when you're an active member, you find where's your ward, and you go and you introduce yourself and you become part of it. I never found my ward. I mean, I know where it is. I could hit it with a slingshot from here, but I've never been there. And I started reading, studying. I happened to stumble across the CES letter, and I read all of that. And as I'm reading, I had this weird feeling come into my chest. Like, you talk about burning, your bosom. I had that sensation more than I've ever had in my life as I read these things, and I started verifying them and reading the gospel topics, essays, and the footnotes, and seeing. Oh, and I started watching John DeLynn, and that led to other podcasters, and that's when I realized, what the hell, this church is not true. There's no truth in it. And then I continued to learn, continued to find out that Joseph Smith was not a prophet. He was a scoundrel. He was a criminal. He was a con artist. Let me tell you, one con artist to another, I can recognize a con artist.
That's right. You've hunted them down as well as worked with them side by side. No?
Yeah. And I'm like, holy crap, I need to let the world know they're wrong. They're wrong. The church members are wrong. But then my sweet fiance, Amanda, said, listen, you've discovered this for yourself, but others are going to have to discover it for themselves, because you're not going to convince anybody. And she was so right. I tried one time to bring it up to one of my sisters. That was the last time ever. And it was just something gentle. I told her that, isn't it interesting how the temple rituals have changed? She said, they have not changed, she said. I'm like, well, yeah, they've eliminated, a few things from the actual endowment sessions, and
You could describe those.
And
the cutting the throat and cutting your gullet open. And by the way, here's a few things that, well, anyway, so I knew from there's like this barrier that went up around her instantly, and she would listen to nothing I had to say. And that's
Right.
when I realized that Amanda was right.
And Randy, when you said you read the CES letter, and at that time you were kind of alone in your feelings about how it didn't seem like the church was true, but you don't have really any extra knowledge. And now you have examples and sort of testimonies, and there other people exist that don't believe in the church anymore. And now you're not alone. Did you feel like that?
You know, you hit it on the head, the nail. Here's what I felt like a man wandering in the desert after the world ends, and I'm the only survivor. And I wander and I wander, and then one day I come across a village of living people, and it's like, wait, I'm not alone on this earth. And I go into the village and they take me in. And that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was coming out of a lonely desert when I started to realize there's a whole community of people that are like me, that were LDS and stopped believing. As a matter of fact, the community of people are so much more sincere in their beliefs than the LDS people ever were that I knew. And it was just the warmest feeling to start watching these. I mean, I was glued to my computer watching all of these podcasts. I sucked in John DeLynn and RFM and Bill Reel. Then I started to learn about Alyssa Grenfell and Gene Judson. I don't know if you've heard of his show, Megan Connor, these people.
And Cults to Consciousness, Shalice Ansola.
I drank this in, and it was, and still is, the most incredible feeling. It kind of torques me off a little that I went through life and wasted so much time and so much money, because I held about every position you can think of, from being in the bishopric 3 times, elders quorum presidency. You know, I think of all the hours and service that I put in. I don't regret putting in service. If I can help people, that's awesome. What I regret is doing it in the name of the church, and you know, finding out that it's not a church, it's a cult. And it fits it. What was I thinking wearing underwear that I was commanded to wear that I couldn't stand, and going through the temple ritual, which is just a knockoff of the Masonic order? It's just Joseph Smith learning that, coming over and implementing it into you know, his church. And all of these revelations, it's like, you have got to be kidding me. I really fell for it, because I was raised in Mesa, Arizona, where almost everybody was Mormon, all of my friends. So I didn't even know I was in a cult. It's like I used to weigh 310 pounds, and I was, I'm going to use the F word, I was fat, and I never knew it. I never knew it. One day I realized it by looking at a picture of myself. It's like, holy crap, you're a whale. You're incredibly fat. But you know, it's just how I lived. I didn't even realize I was fat. But when my eyes were open, when I saw that, I knew what I had to do, and I did it. And now I feel so much better. And that's how I lost 112 pounds. And that's how I feel about the gospel. It's like I look back and think, what was I thinking wearing these garments and going to the temple where they do these weird ass rituals that are totally cult. It's a cult. You look at the bite model of a cult, the 7 signs, and we check the box off on every one of them. It's like, oh my gosh.
That's right. And just like shedding weight is frees you, shedding a belief that was restrictive for no reason other than to benefit the organization, that is freeing as well.
Exactly.
So Randy, just for a little bit of context, how long ago was this that you read the CES letter and started listening to podcasts?
It was 5 years ago.
Okay.
Did it have to do with COVID, having extra time on your hands?
It had to do with moving into a new home and losing my job. fortunately, I have, investments that I live off of now, but I had time to do some reading and some studies, and that's when I realized there's no way I'm going over to that church over there and walking in. I shared on Facebook, but I broke my wrist falling on the ice this year, and I couldn't begin to shovel my driveway because I couldn't use my wrist. And there were some LDS boys with their leaders who were shoveling the driveways of the members. I have a member beside me and a member across the street and a member kitty corner. I'm almost surrounded. And because, it's so close to the chapel. And I hollered over to the boys. I said, "Hey, can I pay you guys to shovel my driveway?" And they looked at me and said, they didn't even say anything, just kind of shook their heads and kept walking. And, I thought, is that what Christ would do? I needed help. I needed help. And there's so many people in my neighborhood and in my community that would have come over and spent 10 minutes because that's all it would take to get that snow off my driveway. But no, not these members, because I wasn't a member of their church. They didn't know me from Adam. They didn't know I had once been LDS. Yet when the missionaries, go ahead, Megan.
It would have been a good social experiment to see if you could have said, "I promise to come to church if you will take care of the snow in front of my yard." If that would have been the payment that they would have thought was a great price for you to pay.
There's a better chance of monkeys flying out of my butt than me going to church again. So I probably wouldn't make that promise.
The comment that I was going to make is just the rank hypocrisy that this church that bears the name of Jesus Christ, who was a servant above everything else, refused to help somebody when they asked for help. And I don't want to blame those young men or those leaders or whatever, but it's woven into the fabric of Mormonism that we help other Mormons before we help anybody else. And if they're not investigating the church, taking the discussions, we're really not interested. Or if we are, it's only for the purpose of trying to, surreptitiously teach the gospel to you. And I had a dear friend whom I still love, who's in the church. But when we were ward missionaries together, she said, you need to create an opportunity to have a gospel discussion. And so, if I had been in that situation, I would have come and shoveled your driveway, but only because it would have created an opportunity for me to say, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we believe in serving and helping people. And would you come to church with me? Not because I genuinely cared about you or because I wanted to. Now, that being said, Randy, next time you need help shoveling your driveway, just call me. I'll be there in 5 minutes.
That's right. And we're not saying that that's what all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are like. There are thousands and thousands of really good people, because it's the same percentage of good people in the church as it is that are good people that are Muslims, that are atheists, that are Hindu, that are Shinto, that are everything else, because
Shih Tzu.
and so, there are lots of good people, and we don't want to paint the picture that they're taught to not be good, but it's just the examples that we're sharing, that there are things that are placed as barriers to actually be good people by saying it must be in this context of sharing the gospel and building up the church and doing things like that.
One of the things I was sharing when I interviewed Jenny Gage, that interview will air later today, my values And my character did not change when I left the church. I still believe in honesty and integrity and personal integrity. I still believe in helping my fellow man. I still believe in doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. And so for members to insinuate that just because you've left the church, you're not worthy of help or whatever it was that they were thinking, they didn't know you weren't they didn't know that you were an apostate. Shall we put it that way? But what I would posit is that a lot of people who are in the church allow the church to dictate to them what their values and their morality is. And when you allow an organization to do that, you're adopting the values of that organization. When you look at the actual values of the LDS Church, if you want to know what an organization values, look at their litigation history. Look at who they sue. Look at who they've been sued by.
Look at what they do with their money.
Look at what they do with their money, how they actually spend their resources. And the sad part is that they have so many resources, they have so much money, and yet their own members are starving, some of them.
Right. Yep.
And they would tell those people to keep paying their tithing rather than helping them out. Or they would say, well, we can help you out with a food order, but you have to also pay your tithing.
Right.
So anyway, it's an incongruence between what they say and what they actually do.
And there's an example that is actually in the news this last year, and maybe even longer, and it will still be in the news probably for the next year, is the Fairview, Texas temple. The leaders of the community of Fairview were trying to get the church to send out leaders who represented the church that were decision makers, and all the church would do is send lawyers and threaten to sue if the community didn't do what the church wanted,
which was against the law, their zoning ordinances.
Right. They were trying to have the community bend the rules just for them, because somehow the height of a spire was a meaningful thing to religion, which I had never heard whatsoever. And Randy, you went to the Mesa Temple. How high is the spire above the Mesa Temple?
Ain't no spire.
There's not a spire whatsoever. So all the things that happen within the Mesa Temple are null and void, apparently.
That's
right. Because we didn't have that spire pointing to God.
Yeah. And it's just that you guys were missing the crucial element, and little did you know at the time.
You two are making incredible points and such valid points. The people of the church are good people in general. They are. But why in the hell can't they realize? How can they not think? Although I was one of them. But if they look back, we wouldn't let Black people in? Are you kidding me? Our prophet, seer, and revelator says that if a man and a woman, a Black man and a white woman are seen together, they should be killed on the spot. What? And it wasn't even until, I was just out of high school when they finally said, oh, guess what? Now the Blacks have full privileges of the church and can enter the temple. How are so many good people deceived that that's a Jesus Christ thing? And now, I have 2 sons that are gay. I have 4 kids. 2 of them are gay. Incredible, incredible sons, incredible people. But our church says, well, no, you can be gay, but don't act on it. Don't you dare physically love another human being.
Yeah, you can be gay, but if you want to be acceptable to God and Jesus Christ, then you will be celibate for the rest of your life.
Seriously, are you effing kidding me that a Church of Jesus Christ rejects people because of how they're made and how they're born?
Yeah, and if you're in an organization that uses scripture to other disenfranchised groups will say, people that can't really defend themselves, then you might want to be introspective in the type of person that you would want to be. There's a loving Jesus, and there's a gospel of love, and apparently there's a gospel of obedience, where obeying 15 older white men mostly, is more important than the gospel of love. And that's just a shame that that's what it's developed into.
Right. And I find out that this tithing I paid so that I could be with my wife again in the celestial kingdom didn't go to helping any of the poor people. It didn't go to help feed children that are don't have shoes, they don't know where dinner's coming from. It went into their frickin' corporate investments to make more money and to build, a $260 billion organization. And it's kind of funny because I'm pretty sure that Christ wouldn't appreciate that.
Or even when he returns, need that money. It's sort of like in the Star Trek movie where, like, what does God need with a starship? What does God need with $1 trillion in cash?
Right. And they keep trying to tell us that they need this money for what's going to happen when Jesus comes again. And my thought to that is, well, you must not believe in the efficacy of your God if you think that he's going to need money in order to do whatever he needs to do to, fix the world or whatever when Jesus comes again. But Randy, two things that came up for me when you started talking about Black people in the priesthood and the ban on temple covenants and priesthood ordinances for Black people. One of them was that I had that same question for myself, but I gaslit myself because I'm a 7th generation Mormon. And I thought 7 generations of people can't possibly be wrong about this. How is it that all of my ancestors, my grandparents, my grandmother, who served 3 missions after her husband died, how could she possibly be wrong about this?
And every general conference, they rose their hand to support the leaders.
Yes, exactly. And so that's one of the reasons why so much of my cognitive dissonance, so many of my things that went on the shelf went there and stayed on the shelf, because I thought, it's not possible that all of these generations of people could have been wrong about their beliefs. That's just not possible. There's no way that could be true. And also, the temple ban and the priesthood ban on Black people was the first thing that caused me to go and do some research for the first time, because I was writing my book about my experiences and healing from trauma, and I had a chapter on Mormonism because the culture of Mormonism was very harmful to me as a woman with a spouse who was not an active member. I was not allowed to be sealed to my children. I was faithful in going to the temple, but I just had to wait until some man could be sealed to me before I could be sealed to my children. So anyway, I was writing that chapter, and I thought, when I was teaching gospel doctrine, I seem to remember that Joseph Smith did ordain some Black people to the priesthood. And why did we stop that? Was it just because Brigham Young was racist and he was imposing his racism onto what he thought God wanted for the church? And so I started doing that research, and I realized that is exactly what happened, that Joseph Smith had ordained some Black people to the priesthood. Elijah Abel was one of the first, and he exercised his priesthood until Brigham Young told him he was not allowed to do that anymore. And Brigham Young was the one who said, not from a revelation from God, but just he was the one that said, we're not going to ordain Black people. In fact, not only that, but every single white person is going to have to be ordained into the priesthood before a single Black person is going to get the priesthood. Maybe not realizing there were already several Elijah Abel's sons for a few that already had the priesthood. And when I realized that it was just Brigham Young who had taken his power and authority and not prayed to God for a revelation about it, but just made a blanket statement and decided to change the lives and the fates of an entire race of people.
That's incredible points you're making, and so true, and you put it so eloquently. That's exactly my feelings as well. As a result of my Facebook post, I received a phone call yesterday from a man. He had messaged me and asked if he could speak to me. He's a member of the church, no longer active. He's from Africa, a black man. And he said, I just wanted to know, what was it that made you leave the church? And I told him there were a few things. And we started talking about the ban of the African Americans, anyone with dark skin, anyone of color was not able to, receive all the full blessings of the church. He said that even though in 1978 they started allowing that, the stigma lives on. He was a convert to the church. He went on a mission to Los Angeles. Most of the people that he taught were black families, and no one ever told him about the ban on the black people of the priesthood. He never knew. Through his whole mission, he never knew. Until one day, one of the people he was teaching said, asked him about it, and he's like, I've never heard this. And when he found this out, of course, his shelf started to bend. And he's never been able to find someone to love and marry. He couldn't find someone to take to the temple when he was an active member. He'd walk into church and he said, even though, we have full privileges now, you still walk into the church and everyone looks at you and treats you differently. The stigma lives on. The stigma, like you said, Megan, has been ingrained into our family members generations back. It continues to live on, even though they can go to the temple now. They're still a marked people, a cursed people who, like I think it was Brigham Young that taught that they were the fence sitters in the war in heaven, and they don't deserve to have the blessings here. And that he's lived with that, and it's destroyed a part of his life. He's no longer active in the church, but this is the point that we were talking about. How can people who are kind and loving, who say that they're members of the true church of Jesus Christ, pick and choose who they want to love, who they want to allow into their organization?
Yeah.
It baffles me. I mentioned before the show a video of a sweet little girl who, I think she was an early teen, bearing her testimony in sacrament meeting. And it was a beautiful testimony. And she said, I know that I'm a child of God, and I'm thankful to be a member of Christ Church. I know that Heavenly Father made me like I am. And I love and accept everyone despite their sexual preferences. I'm just paraphrasing, but she mentioned in her testimony that she was born gay. And when she started talking about, I have to remember that this is how Heavenly Father made me. And one of the bishopric, if it wasn't the bishop, it was someone in the bishoprics, they turned her mic off. And they went up to the pulpit and said, sit down. She said, what? Sit down. And just kicked her off the stage. Why? Because she was gay, yet she bore this beautiful testimony. Like the only difference between that and the testimony of a different member is that she mentioned that she was gay and she knew that she was made like that. And they kick her off the stage. How is this a church of Jesus Christ? I stopped paying my tithing after I lost my testimony, and I started paying what I would consider to be tithing to the poor people that I would see on the street, the beggars, the people that had no way of paying their rent. I remember taking my tax return and giving it to my friend because he was going to be evicted from his home. To me, that is tithing. That is what would make Christ smile. I don't know God anymore. I don't know Jesus Christ. I do believe, I don't believe in the Mormon God, and I sure as hell don't believe in the Mormon Jesus Christ. But I do believe that there's something out there because I've been blessed so extensively in my life, miracle after miracle. And, you know, I could never deny that there's not something that's watching over me, whatever it may be. And as my late wife, one of my guardian angels, maybe, I know for a fact that it's because of her and her work, wherever she is and whatever form she's in, introduced me to Amanda, my new sweetheart, because she knew exactly what I needed in my life. And I have been blessed beyond measure when it comes to miracles. I was a professional dancer for a couple of years. We, as part of a men's group, it was called the Daddy's Jam, and we would travel around and do it's kind of a a little bit of a sexy dance, nothing like stripping. And believe me, no one would want to see that.
What was it called, Randy? I missed it because
it was called the Daddy's Jam.
The Daddy's Jam.
Yeah, on Tuesdays with Tim, I'll have to show you the posters.
I love it.
But yeah, we it started as almost a fluke. The choreographer, Janet Jackson's choreographer, flew in and taught us some of these dances and worked with us for a few months. And it was just for a big dance competition that was coming up, and we were just going to be featured guests. But it was crazy because we were dancing and the men were going crazy because here's some old farts up there dancing and being successful. They loved it. The women loved it because it was men dancing and throwing their coats off and a few sexy moves in there, and they were
Imagine a bunch of 40-year-old Napoleon Dynamites dancing, right?
they'd throw lingerie and stuff up on the stage, and the kids just went nuts because, hey, that's my dad up there, or those are dads up there. And it caught on, and we started filling up auditoriums like some of the famous venues, and we performed at Walt Disney World. That was weird, going back as a dancer after I had worked as a manager there. And Universal Studios and several locations within those two parks. And we had to actually make a decision. Do we want to continue to be professional dancers and tour the US, or do we want to stay with our jobs and dissolve Daddy's Jam? Because it was taking up a lot of time, all the rehearsals, and there was some drama that went on, and we decided that we would just take the fame that we got and keep it in our minds and in the posters and the notes and stuff. But none of them were LDS. None of the people that worked for our production were LDS, but I'd never felt so close to people. And that was another thing that just about shattered my shelf at that time. I'd never felt so loved in my life as this group of dads. There were 8 of us all together. And this group of dads, it was a kind of love that I'd never experienced in the church with the positions that I held. I should have been loved, but that's when I felt true love and true teamwork was with the Daddy's Jam and the people that would support us and love us just because we were doing something that old guys like us didn't typically do. And I say old, I was in my 40s, young 40s, but to me that was old to be dancing. But that was another thing that, I started to feel love. And now the post-Mormon community, like Jean and you, Megan, and so many who have just poured out their love when I wrote that Facebook post. That's true Christ-like love right there. They don't care. They don't care what my sins are. They don't care if I'm wearing garments, special magical underwear or not. What I'm wearing today is my shirt that says, did I already show this in here?
No, not to the show.
Your first mistake was believing that I'm a lamb, a sheep, and it's a picture of a lion, and it's got the sheep down here. Because guess what? I'm not one of the sheep. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore. I can't share this with my member friends because they've been indoctrinated like I was from the time they were born.
Yeah.
All the primary songs that they learned. I hope they call me on a mission. I want to go to the temple. Praise to the man.
You can't share this with all of your friends that are members still, but some members have applauded your own journey.
That's what I'm saying. They have applauded my journey, and I don't mean to be this is not anti-Mormon, but some of them told me that that's all they needed to follow in my footsteps because they too want to feel what I'm feeling.
And part of the journey is regaining your sovereignty, becoming in charge of yourself again. There's something that is called infantilization that happens in the church where you have even the patriarchal blessings are, you don't know enough to not receive guidance from us. You have to be told what the things are that you should do. You can't judge for yourself what your life should be like. You have to have some sort of parental authority tell you this is the path that you must take in order to be a part of this church or a part of humanity or whatever. And really, we're all worthy by ourselves without having someone else judge us. We're all worthy. We all have brains. We all can look at things around us, and we all can take information and judge for ourselves. In fact, that's even, I think, a scripture somewhere. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be gathering information and judging for ourselves what things should be done. And that's what I'll say that humanity has been doing for maybe hundreds of thousands of years. And we're just at this place right now where we live in the age of the internet, and the information like the CES letter can be had in the keystrokes of just a few letters, right? And it's all information. And it's okay if you take that information and keep your belief. I'm okay with that. I value everyone at every part of their journey. I understand. I've been almost everywhere in a journey of faith, right? Except for I haven't been Hindu yet, we'll say. But it's gaining information and using Well, the brain that a creator has given you, however your brains are created, whatever your belief is, a creator would not want you to let that magnificent brain go unused. This show is about helping people. We honor creators to show people that creators with their own minds come up with things, and then they decide to share with everyone else what their creativity is. And that's an example. We all can be creators. We all can do things to benefit each other. And we just hope here at Latter Daily Digest that everyone can take Randy's story and all the other stories of creativity that we share and decide for yourself what you might be able to do to increase your intelligence, to increase your locus of control, to do things to gain your self-sovereignty. That's the main thing. And if you choose to be a self-sovereign person within any organization and still abide by those things, that's okay. But just let everyone else do the same thing. And there's something that's going on right now in the Mormon, ex-Mormon sphere that I'm sure Megan's going to talk about, and we'll have to refer, since we're going to run this show probably on Tuesday. Go to Megan's channel and see what she brought into that world, and we can tease it. Megan, you want to say anything more about it so people can go check it out?
Yeah, I did an interview with Jenny Gage, who is an ex-Mormon creator who was literally attacked online by some Mormon creators. And my point in talking about that and bringing air to it is that we shouldn't be attacking each other as creators. We should be honoring each other and showing kindness and compassion to each other. But I wanted to say, Randy, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful faith with us. I just really love the way that you expressed that you believe, this belief that you have, that you are being watched over and cared for. I love that. I think it's beautiful. And I also want to point out that the thing that I think is most poignant about your story today is that what you're telling us is that you did all of the things that you were told to do in the church. You were faithful, you were righteous, you were a believer. You did all of those things, and yet you still did not feel a sense of love and of community, and you still didn't feel like the church lived up to the promises that it promised you. If you would do all of those things, those promises did not come to fruition. And I think that's very poignant for people to understand.
Thank you, Megan and Jean, for such an insightful compilation of my thoughts and what I've said. And the last thing I want to say is Jesus Christ died for our sins according to many people's beliefs and according to Scripture. And if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, then you must wonder, why do you have to go to a man in a bishop's office and confess your sins when Christ already took care of all that for us? Why must something so simple as drinking a cup of coffee or masturbating keep you out of the celestial kingdom? Are you kidding me? I love humanity, and I love the members of the church that are friends of mine. I love my family dearly. But I feel bad that they think that their eternal salvation is contingent on their activity and obedience to the LDS Church. What it's contingent on, and you can read it all throughout the Scriptures, is how you feel in your heart. How do you treat your fellow man and fellow women? How do you express your love to them? To me, that's the gospel of Jesus Christ in a nutshell.
That's right. And expressing your love is not doxing somebody and not trying to destroy their lives. in some way. And so.
And I so appreciate you, both of you, allowing me to share this story, because my loved ones need to hear it. And then if they choose to accept it, that's fine. If they choose to reject it, that's okay too. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my happiness, because I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. And I haven't started sinning. I haven't, I mean, it's not because I have the freedom to commit sins. It's just that I feel free now, and I feel like I can worship how my heart tells me I must.
That's right. Thanks, Randy,
beautiful, Randy,
coming on the show and sharing with everyone. And like we said, this is Randy's story. This is his experience, his journey. And we honor people that are on their journeys. And, Randy is also asking that people love him no matter what they think that their God says. In fact, you could actually show in most of the scriptures that you are supposed to love Randy and Megan and Jean just as much as you'd love anybody else. And and what is love? Love is being kind. Love is being courteous. Love is being nice, right? That all those things are in there. And so, yes, thanks again, Randy. And we're going to air this probably on Tuesday. And so tonight, Tuesdays with Tim, we're going to talk about from saints to sinners. And that's just a facetious, funny way of saying we used to think that coffee was bad for us, and now we don't. And so now we're just free to exercise things according to our own conscience. And so thanks, everybody, for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. And go to Megan's channel and come and watch me and Randy interview a bunch of people. We've already have like a dozen shows, I think, under our belts. And so come join us for Tuesdays with Tim and have a great rest of 2025. Bye-bye.
Thank you.